All right, and we are live. We are back after the open networking break. I hope you had a great time talking with the employers from this morning's sessions or enjoying music from DJ Russ Powell. We are so excited about this workshop. We have the amazing Jennifer Tardy here. She is a career success coach. She's a CEO of JTC, and she is here to talk about personal branding and online presence. If you are here in the chat, say hi, let us know where you're tuning in from. And we may have just a little bit of time at the end to ask questions, but if you do have questions throughout Jennifer's presentation, please put those in the chat. We would love to see those. And I am going to go ahead and turn the time over to Jennifer Tardy.
Thank you, Alicia. I do appreciate you. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk with each of you about what I consider to be a really, really important topic. So it's pretty timely too, because most things that we're doing today are online. And you can tell by the title that we're talking about personal branding and online presence. And so my goal is to show you exactly how to be more intentional about your own presence and branding. And the plan to get there is to share some tools with you. And then, like Alicia mentioned a second ago, I want to leave some time at the end to answer a few questions, but I've got a lot of content to share with you. So I'm gonna try and hold to that commitment. Now, before we get started, just in case we have not met before, I'd like to share with you a few things about me and about our organization, Jennifer Tardy Consulting. So I'm Jen Tardy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the owner of JTC, and I come to you with over 15 years of experience in human resources, having spent most of my time in recruiting and leading recruiting teams. And I've had the pleasure of working across and recruiting for many different industries. You can see them listed there, from tech to healthcare, all the way through to plumbing supplies and education. And so one thing that's really important to know is that I am a recruiter at heart, and you're going to see or notice that enthusiasm as we're moving through this presentation. And then at JTC, we actually speak to two audiences. We work with people who are on their job search. More specifically, we help them to navigate bias that can be baked into the hiring process. But we also work with another audience of employers where we are helping them to create effective diversity recruiting programs. And so we're always working on both sides so that we can make it easier for people who are on their job search and employers to connect and forge career success. With that said, enough about me. Let's hop into presence and branding. So to kick start this conversation, let me start with a rhetorical question. Which should come first, the brand or presence? Meaning, should your presence create your brand automatically, or should your brand create your presence intentionally? And as a career coach, my philosophy is very, very simple. Allow your brand to drive your presence, as it creates a more intentional way of showing up. And this is true for work or your professional self, or even in life. And where most people go wrong is that they try to develop a presence without first really thinking about their brand. And so thinking about your brand is like asking yourself this question: what do I want people to think about me when I enter a room, and or what do I want people to think about me when I exit a room? Now, let's say that your answer is this, okay? Let's say that it's, I want people to think, thank goodness Jen is here, right? So this is just me talking, right? Or when I leave a room, I want people to think, I am glad that Jen came to this, whatever the event, the meeting. And then I want you to ask yourself, why? Why are they thinking or even saying these things? Why are they saying, thank goodness? So in other words, what value are you adding that will cause a room full of people to think this way? And value is the operative here. So using this example again, the answer would be this: thank goodness she's here, or that she was here, because we needed her expertise, or we needed her leadership, or we needed her ability to facilitate, right? So the piece that I want to make sure that if you have a pen and a piece of paper, there are people still writing things down in notebooks, but if you have the pen and a piece of paper, I want you to understand that the value is the most important thing, and it's super important to your brand. Okay. But we must consider that there's this elephant in the room, right? People will tell you often not to worry about what other people think about you because you cannot control it. And yes, that is true, but you can't influence it. You can influence what people think about you. And that is the significance of branding. Think about how you can influence the thoughts others have about you, even the ones that they have in their own mind, whether they say it aloud or not. And so, when we just talked a second ago about what people say when you enter a room, it's important to understand that as we're talking about online presence, it means you're not necessarily entering a room. Instead, you're entering conversations. So as we talk about online presence, begin asking yourself this: how will I influence others' thoughts of me when I enter or leave conversations? And how will my brand help me to reach those goals? So for the meat and the potatoes of this, as we're thinking about our online presence, which is entering conversations, right? And branding, which is influencing others' perceptions, there are 5 things that I want you to consider. I want you to consider your audience, your goal, your location, your profile, and your value. Remember, we talked about that before too. And don't worry, because we are going to unpack all of these. Now, let me just do a quick check. Give me a hell yes in the chat if you are still with me and keeping up with me so far. I need to see at least one person drop a yes or even a hell yes in the chat. Let's see. And so as we're unpacking these, I'll still be checking the chat overall as well too. Now, first is your audience. I want you to create a persona of your ideal target audience. And even if you don't have customers per se, and you want to influence someone within your workplace, ask yourself this question: by whom do I desire to be seen or noticed? For example, if you're looking for a job or a promotion, you need to be seen or noticed by a hiring manager or a recruiter, right? And if you're trying to get customers, you need to be seen or noticed by that ideal customer. So that's what it means to first consider your audience. By whom do I want to even be noticed? Second is your goal. So the question is, what is your goal? And why do you care if you're noticed? Do you want to move to the next level? Do you want to gain recognition in an area? Do you want to get a new job opportunity? Always start every goal with the end in mind first. What do you ultimately want to happen through having the right audience to notice your presence or your brand, right? So what is your goal for wanting to create online presence? And then third, I want you to remember that location is everything. You can have an amazing brand and a strong presence, but if none of your ideal audience is there where you're headed, what's the point? What's the point of even being there? So again, I'm always using myself as an example, right? I don't mind being the guinea pig. So when I ask myself, where is my audience? When I think of location, I'm thinking about those 2 factors, right? One, I want to build an online presence where my customers are or where they frequent most often. And number 2, where my customers need me to be. So going back to the earlier question of where's my audience? So, for example, because I work with both employers and job seekers, you will see me most often where my audience is, which is on LinkedIn. When people are thinking about professional networking, they're thinking about LinkedIn. When they're thinking about their job search, they're thinking about LinkedIn. But even employers or recruiters, when they're thinking about recruiting, they're also thinking about LinkedIn. Not only do I have a profile on LinkedIn, I also manage groups on LinkedIn. I appear as a guest on even LinkedIn editors on their shows. So, but what's important here is I'm not spending as much time on other social platforms, or at least they're secondary when it comes to a priority for me and where I want to be seen most frequently. So that's the first question, where's my audience? And then that second question is, where does my audience need me to be? So this is around, what groups, what trainings, etc. Does my audience really need me to be so that I can come back and teach them more? For example, maybe my audience and I are showing up in some of the same learning spaces, or maybe I'm learning and then teaching what I'm learning in some of those spaces where they're actually going to get educated as well too. So I want you to begin to think in the same way. Where's my target audience now? And where do they need me to be? That is how you act with intention. And that is how you determine where you need to be online. Got it? Okay, so the next slide that I'm going to talk with you about is your profile. But again, using me as a guinea pig, you can look at my profile if you like as we're moving through this. And this is number 4, your profile. You can use your QR reader to see the profile. If you're already over there, connect with me as well too, okay? So as I'm talking to you through number 4, which is your profile, you can get a sense of some of the intentional ways that I'm actually creating brand presence using my LinkedIn profile. Because again, remember, that's where my audience is. Are you ready? Okay. Hopefully that was enough time for you to pull up the profile if you wanted to as well. So when it comes to number 4, or your profile, ask yourself, what is the narrative that my audience can gain about you while reading your profile? So I'll ask you again, what is the narrative that your audience can gain about you by reading your online profile? Then when you look at my profile as an example, if you have it up, ask the same question. What is the narrative that you can gain about me when viewing my profile? In other words, what is the message I'm sending to others about my knowledge, my skills, and my experience overall? And how can I influence that narrative? And remember that when you're thinking about your online profile, anything that you share about yourself within your profile needs to connect to the image or the brand, because that's what we're talking about, that you're trying to influence. And anything outside of that could be a distraction, right? So some things to consider when creating your profile. Your image, the actual image, the JPEG or the PNG, the photo that you use is really important. It should feel warm and inviting, meaning would someone feel comfortable reaching out to actually have a conversation with you if they wanted to? I share with people quite often that ideally, smiling in your profile is really important because that's an aspect of what makes you appear warm and inviting. Next, consider your headline. Whatever headline that you're using and whatever social media platform that you're on, they usually give you a space to have, a few words or a few characters. Your headline should be clear and specifically point to the value that you're offering. And you'll sometimes look at profiles and you'll see people say, I do this for them. So it's I do X for Y. I bring this value to this audience. And they'll actually say that up front. And then as you're thinking about your experience section using LinkedIn, make sure that you use a job title and job duties that are known and understood beyond your company. I tell people often that, even one of my jobs was like the director of people services. No one outside of the organization that I used to work in would know what a director of people services would do, or the job description of them. And so what I tend to use is director of human resources because it's more widely known externally. So if people are trying to understand more about my experience, I want to make it as easy for them as possible. Same is true around your job duties. You want to make sure that any job duties that you're putting on there are known and understood beyond your company. It is your job to translate your knowledge, skills, and abilities to what your audience will understand. That's a part of your online presence. And then the last point that I would say is that I really want you to position yourself as ready now for the type of opportunity that you're seeking by building up your online presence. And you can actually do that by showcasing your work. And so a part of showcasing my work on LinkedIn is when you look at the featured section. I'm really intentional not only about showcasing some of my work and that of the team, but also showcasing accolades that have been received for our team on behalf of other organizations in which we partner with in the past. So it's something to really consider, and I invite you to do that on your end as well too. Now, the fifth value that I do want you to consider is, or the fifth thing that I want you to consider is the value. And you've heard me sprinkle that in earlier, but now I really want to take some time and unpack it, because here's where the rubber meets the road. Do not just stalk conversations online. Enter the conversations. And depending on the location or the platform, add relevant value, add relevant information or value to the conversation. So adding value to a conversation means, it could mean either starting a conversation, leading a conversation that has already been started by someone else, moving a conversation forward, taking the conversation even deeper, or even spinning a conversation to talk about more specific aspects of what's going on. And so a lot of people are using, while they're online, they're just using it as a way of, just reading more informally, like I'm going to read this conversation, this news story. But what I'm sharing with you is that a way to really brand yourself, or to make sure that you have a strong online presence, is to engage in conversations. Don't stalk it, engage, enter the conversation. Here are some things to consider. Because we've been using LinkedIn as an example, I do want to share, don't go to LinkedIn contributing to the conversation the same way you would like Facebook or Twitter. Remember your audience, because people who are on LinkedIn, they're doing professional networking. And so the language that I use is probably a little more formal, or the topics that I post about or that I engage in, it's extremely intentional as well too. So if you look back at some topics that I've engaged in overall, I'm either engaging in conversations around the job search, career advice, or I'm engaging in conversations around increasing diversity and diversity recruiting. I'm really intentional about that. And as a matter of fact, the second thing to consider, which is something that I do want to reiterate, is the importance of creating posts, adding articles, sharing information, all that add value, that align with your goal. And if your goal is to position yourself as ready now, as an expert, as a person who's highly sought after, which you can do even when you're on your job search, those are ways of doing that. For example, if you want to be seen as a person who's an expert in software development, and you want hiring managers to see that, enter those conversations. If there are organizations where, if there are organizations that you're interviewing, or that you're really interested in going to work at those organizations, begin thinking about, begin doing some research and finding those who are leaders in those organizations. What conversations are they having already? And begin commenting on those. I now have, I don't know, 20,000 people who are following me on LinkedIn right now, but I can still tell you the repeat folks that I see. So people who are commenting frequently and consistently, I notice that and I don't forget that. So it doesn't matter typically how large a person's following is. If you're consistently engaging in conversations on their platforms or talking about topics that are important to both of you, that is how you build your online presence. Okay, and then, so then to kind of wrap all of it up or to bring it all home, do you see how this works now? And so to reiterate what I said, to have a strong brand and online presence, make sure that there's alignment in your goal, the customer or the audience that you target, where you find your audience or the location, what they read about you or your profile, and the value you are actually bringing to that conversation. So it's your goal, your customer, your location, your profile, and your value. And I always like to add a bonus whenever I can. So here's the bonus for you. If you've ever been on my Career Success channel on YouTube and watched any of those videos, you'll know that I used to end all of my videos with one career success bonus tip for UPs, or as I was saying, underrepresented populations. So in other words, if you are a member of a historically underrepresented population, then that tip was something to give you to consider. And so I want to do that for you today too. Here's the tip. I want you to consider how centuries of exploitation, of being underserved, underrepresented, overlooked, and even discriminated against, how it may have impacted our ability to see ourselves clearly or to see ourselves effectively, right? So I know how much, I already know as a job seeker, how much you actually have to navigate through not only the tactical part of the hiring process, there's also a lot of emotions that we have to navigate as well too. Helping job seekers to work through the emotions that they're feeling is where I spend most of my time when I'm coaching people who are on their job search. And more specifically, it's navigating through our own feelings of, am I enough for this? While also navigating, proving to others that you are enough, right? So I see this all the time with clients. And so your online presence needs to be a true indication of how competent, capable, and qualified you truly are. And if you don't think that you are in a place of truly selling your accomplishments, of selling your knowledge, your skills, and your experience, the way that it should be represented, because maybe you are dealing with your own emotions around, am I enough? Then the tip is maybe hire a professional to support that process, or maybe connect with someone that you know and trust who can remind you of just how knowledgeable, educated, and qualified you actually are. Because it's important that we see ourselves in the way, in a specific way, in order to sell ourselves in a specific way. As an example, if you do not believe that you have any value to offer an employer, if you're on your job search, then that is likely going to show up in the way in which you create your own online presence and how much you engage online as well too. So it's food for thought, and it's definitely something that that I do want everyone that's listening to this to consider. And while we are on the topic about career advice, I want to share with you one of our newest freebie guide. So it's absolutely free. And it's called The Miseducation of the Underrepresented Job Seeker. And there are 10 myths that I list in there that I absolutely dispel for you. And I show you alternative ways of thinking and approaching your job search. And so if you want to download your copy, all you have to do is just go to jennifertardy.com/resources. And with that, I hope that that helps you as you are on your own journey to creating your personal brand and your online presence. Are you ready for questions, Alicia? How are we looking?
Yes. Yeah, we can hop back in for questions. Thank you so much. This was such an incredible presentation, such great things to take away and learn for everyone that is job seeking right now or trying to build their brand and think about how their online presence looks. So if you have any questions, get them into the chat. I want to just start by saying thank you for speaking with that bonus tip about how underrepresented people have to think about how to boost yourself. What is like you think your biggest, how do you hype yourself up in those moments when you are feeling like you're not enough, or you're questioning if you're capable? What's your go-to way that you think works best for most people?
So here's what's interesting about this. Let me actually take a couple of steps back because I've had clients before, and I typically can pick this up when we're putting the resume together. And so I'll look at the resume and I'm like, okay, now let me just ask you some questions about your knowledge, your skills, and your experience. I'll take all that information, drop it into the resume, and I'll hold it up and I'm like, who is this person right here? And they'll be like, wow, is that me? Absolutely. That is the way that I see you. And so then the question becomes, how come you don't see you the same way that I, and likely tons of other people see you as well too. And so when I say that one of the ways that we help people to kind of work through that is through, instead of saying go and create your own resume, it's working with a career coach that can just ask you questions. And so now all you're doing is answering those questions. Did you ever count X? Did you ever count 3 widgets a week? Yes, I did. Do you know that that is amazing and that most people can't count 3 widgets a week, right? And so it's being able to do it interview style, and then someone else is pulling that information out for you, and then you're putting it together inside of your resume overall. But then another piece too is when it comes to am I enough, it actually shows up also when you're interviewing with people. Because one of the first things that I say is you have to be able to sell your value to the employer. And some people, in particular, women that I'm working with, they'll say, "Oh, it just feels so sleazy. I don't want to, sell myself." And then I'll say, "Well, another way to think about it is speak to facts." So if for instance, the employer is like, hey, we're looking for someone who is an amazing presenter. Like you have to be an amazing presenter. And then you don't want to come off as, bragging. Instead, speak to facts by being able to say, well, I've been presenting for the last 10 years, and every time there's an evaluation, I always get the highest score. And so now it's not bragging, it's speaking factually. So you're speaking to facts, which makes it easier for you to share your story and to sell your value.
Love that. That's such great advice. We have a question from Kaylee. They said, what advice would you give regarding work experience on LinkedIn, especially if you're interested in multiple industries? So you have a background in a couple different areas. How can you make that cohesive?
So it's a great question. So it really is, my go-to word is intentionality, intention or intentionality. And so if you have, so think about human resources. So that's the background that I have, or more specifically, recruiting. Regardless of the industry that I'm interested in, I could be interested in multiple industries, recruitment remains the same. And so I'm not necessarily trying to sell myself or package myself as a recruiter made for this one specific industry, but I'm trying to package myself as a recruiter that has a specific, I'm a skilled recruiter, and I'm able to speak more toward what it looks like to be a skilled recruiter. Same thing, again, I use the example of a software engineer. The same thing for, any other position, an accountant as well too. So thinking about it from that standpoint, focus on the role, and if you want to only work in one specific industry, after you focus on the role, then being able to say, how do I position myself to be ready now for this industry? But outside of that, if it's not one specific industry that you're thinking about, then focus on the role regardless of the industry.
Awesome. We'll take one last question really fast out of the chat. What if you are, from Lisa, what if you are a self-learner, but you've had an employment gap and you want to entice employers?
What if you are a self-learner? I'm not sure the connection to the rest of it, but we can talk about the employment gap.
Okay.
So there are a few things that employers never question, right? As it relates to employment gaps, right? So there are things like I was taking care of, someone who may have been sick, or I decided I had to move because my partner's in the military, or there are specific things like that, or I left to go and further my education. And so being able to state that and then just move on from the conversation, you don't have to add any more details. So if you're in one of those spaces where you have a gap in your experience on things that are just normal life experiences, then state it and just move forward. Another way, so let's say it's not one of those scenarios. Let's say another question that I'm asking then is, was your position supposed to come to an end? And then you were just looking for a position after that. Those are like consultant roles or contract roles. And if it was supposed to come to an end in your resume or in your LinkedIn profile, being able to say this was a contract position, those things are acceptable. And so any way that you can kind of close the loop that way, then that can be very helpful for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are a little bit over time, and I don't want to keep Jen too long. We really appreciate her time, and thank you so much for coming to talk to our job seekers on Fairstream for Get Hired Summit today, for providing this information. Like on the screen, you can head to Jennifer's website, jennifertardy.com/resources, to download this information package. Or just to see all the amazing resources that she has as well. So we are going to wrap up this session. Thank you so much, Jen, for being here. And we will be back in just a few minutes to start info sessions for the afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.